Welcome to Off Grid Victory. So this is about the season where we get wild edibles galore here, especially in the berry form. So I did a episode on black raspberries, and that's pretty rare. But what's not rare are these guys right here. And so this is the regular blackberry, and they're all over the place here in the Ozarks. You can find them pretty much everywhere. Along the tree line or even in the deep woods. And so the deer eat it, the insects eat it, everything eats it, including ourselves. And what's nice about these blackberries is they are indigenous and they grow everywhere. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you get the blackberry. I'm not going to pick these because they're not outstanding examples. Let me go in here. What you want to do is pick them very black as possible, and you want it to come off easily. Like that one's not coming off so easily. Let's try this one. No, not so much. Okay, so that's not coming off that easily either, so I'm gonna have to pull it off like that just to show you. But that blackberry is not as ripe as it can be, and so we do need it to ripen a little more. And so I'm gonna let these sit, and I'll come back to it before the deer get it, right? Because yeah, the deer have been getting it, as you can see right here. Like, yeah, that leaf's been chomped off. And so yeah, we're in kind of a competition for this right now with the wild animals as well as for us. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is how this particular plant propagates. So, you know, we obviously have the berries, they fall to the ground. Birds eat a little bit of it, you know, some of it gets pooped out by other animals, things like that. But this particular blackberry, it's the type that grows really, really tall. So I'm going to show you some of the patches here. This blackberry, this one at the highest point right up there, that's probably a good 7 feet tall. And so what ends up happening is they do this. If they get overloaded by fruit, such as this one, you can see that the base of it is somewhere in there, and then it kind of arcs into the tree, and then it comes right down, and it hits the ground. So when it hits the ground like this, what could happen is it could either get chomped on, or even if it touches the soil for a prolonged period of time, it'll reroot right there and create a new plant. And so that plant will now have two plants, one rooted here, one rooted here. And let's say an animal goes through, cuts the other side, well, it's going to start replanting itself here. So that's the other way it naturally propagates. It will kind of fall down to the ground and hit the soil. And of course, we could do that too. In terms of blackberries, we can propagate our own by just bending a very long piece like this and putting it into soil, and then later on coming by and cutting it. But it also naturally happens too. So that's an interesting thing about these blackberries. And the wild ones, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're as tasty as the cultivated kinds. They're certainly not as big. And so I would say, as a homesteader, go ahead and invest in a thornless variety. These obviously have thorns. We can still use them. I mean, you can use them for teas, things like that, especially new growth like this. But in terms of the actual berries, yeah, they're not as big. They're not as tasty. I think some YouTubers are doing it, you guys, an injustice by saying that the wild edibles are just as good as the cultivated. In my experience, that's usually not the case. So go ahead and buy the cultivated kind. You'll get a larger fruit, and most of the times a more tasty fruit. So once again, you want to pick these blackberries when they're really black and they're really ripened, and it should easily come off. And if it doesn't, then it's not ripe. It's going to be too tart. It's not going to be that tasty. And in terms of propagation, naturally the seeds, of course, and the long guys, when it comes down like this, will root down there And so, yeah, that's another way it propagates even naturally. So, yeah, try that at home for your cultivated kind. And maybe later on I can try to find you the short raspberries that we have here that grow really close to the ground. Now that, I will say, is a tastier raspberry than the cultivated kind. But in terms of the normal black raspberries that we find here that grow really high like this, and are abundant here in the Ozarks, they're really not as good as the cultivated kind. So I wouldn't rely on that. I would plant your own and make sure it's fenced off from the deer, and you'll be enjoying blackberries. Alrighty, shalom.